Welcome to the Inside Blitz.
Hey, everybody, welcome back to the SCB Steelers Inside Blitz, presented by Deck Roofing Incorporated of South Florida. And once again, this is our short form podcast where yours truly will get an opportunity to share a few things, since the other three guys talk most of the time on the regular podcast, which is coming up Thursday night at 10. Just a few thoughts while the Steelers are into OTAs now. And of course, Aaron Rodgers has graced us with his presence. I would say, first and foremost, the quarterback situation. I do not read anything into it yet. It's May. There's a long way to go. And I know that the beat writers and stuff that are there at practice were commenting and reporting that, you're in terms of your order of who was doing what. You had obviously Rodgers, and then Will Howard, Mason Rudolph, and Drew Aller. And a lot of people are immediately jumping to the fact that, wow, Howard's second. I don't think that means a whole lot right now. If that's what it's looking like in training camp, then I think you definitely stand up. You pay a little attention to that. And really what that does is it all boils down to the question of who is the number 2 quarterback going to be once we head into September. Because I think there is a contingent of fans and experts that think the Steelers will go with youth. They'll go with Howard. They'll go with Aller as the third quarterback. And they'll try to get a 6th round pick maybe for Mason Rudolph. And look, that's entirely possible. Maybe a team suffers some injuries at quarterback, and now all of a sudden he gets you maybe a 5th round pick. I don't know. There's that group that seems to think that could happen, and then there's the other side of that is those that believe there's no way that Mike McCarthy would ever enter a season with 2 completely inexperienced guys to back up a soon-to-be 43-year-old quarterback, and therefore he would keep Rudolph and likely send Howard packing. Now, the practice squad rules have changed significantly in the last several years. I think my initial reaction was you would probably just move Howard to the practice squad and see how things go from there, and risk the opportunity, or the possibility, I should say, that a team will poach him from the practice squad. So I right now, I mean, if you put a gun to my head and said, which one's it going to be, I would say they keep Rudolph. I just think it's just so dangerous to go into a season with essentially two rookie quarterbacks, because Will Howard he didn't do anything last year. He busted up his finger, his hand there in training camp, never saw a snap. And he got some snaps later in the year, but mostly that was just in practice and stuff. He never saw game action, so he might as well be a rookie in the same vein as Drew Aller. And look, they spent a lot of time with Drew Aller in the rookie camp, and rightfully so. You invested a 3rd round pick on him, so that's I would expect them to pay a lot of attention to him, but he's got a long way to go. They're breaking him down, they're building him back up fundamentally. And I would think probably too mentally as well, because that was always one of the concerns with him at Penn State. So that's kind of the way I think the QB thing settles at this particular time. And again, I'm not putting money on anything. I am not going to, make any sort of declarations, which is so incredibly popular these days in talking sports. And I just don't see a reason to do it. Let's just get through the summer. Let's get into training camp, and then let's see how things work out, because as we know, you are always one snap away from your entire position group being reshuffled because of an injury or a trade, anything like that. So I think that's what we got to keep an eye on. One other interesting note too is the offensive line. I think a lot of people have been talking about that. The pretty much just the complete reshuffling of it this week. And if you didn't catch it, obviously Frazier was at center, but they moved Mason McCormick over to the left side. And they moved Troy Fatanu over to the left side. And on the right, you had Spencer Anderson at guard and Dylan Cook, who filled in admirably at left tackle when Broderick Jones went out last year. He was on the right side. I think that's what you're going to start with. I think we're all expecting that Jennings Dunker at some point is probably going to slide into that guard spot. He's just too damn good in the run and serviceable in pass protection. Now look, if he's not picking things up, then that's a whole other issue. But everything I know about the young man, he's a pretty bright young man, and that shouldn't be a problem. And then of course you've got Maxi Hanachor too. They're working very, very hard with his hand placement because the feet are great. Feet are outstanding. I mean, he looks a lot like a guy who played a lot of soccer and a lot of basketball as a younger man, I should say, because he is a young man. But the hand is going to be the hand placement and everything is going to be the big thing. So I think they'll roll with that group right now, and just see where things go from there. I still think there's flexibility. Mike Tomlin was a big believer in lineman flexibility. I like that idea, but I also think that at times you do have to. There are certain guys that just need a spot, and that's what they have to focus on. And I don't know if any of these guys are like that. I think Troy Fatanu today, some of his comments, he made it pretty clear that he expects that I've got to be able to play just about anywhere on the line. And at the same time, you look at a Broderick Jones, who might be a candidate for the PUP list, just based on the fact that he's not able to do a whole lot yet. But I really think versatility is huge. But yes, you've got to have some of those guys and I think Jones was one of those. They probably should have just left him at either left or right tackle and said, "Here, this is what you're going to do," because I think it really hampered his development. But that leads me to one other thing about this offensive line too. This is a completely different coaching staff. We are already hearing great things about Jari Evans. Okay, Jari Evans is the really, really good former guard of the New Orleans Saints, and there was a lot of praise for him as a coach, a mentor, a guy that understood what it was like to be in the trenches. And the reaction, the feedback about him has been really good. And then you've got James Campen, the head kind of offensive line coach, if you will. He's got a long track record of working with guys from mid-round picks, top picks, free agents. He seems to find some guys, and that's a far cry from what we saw under Coach Tomlin. Pat Meyer, he had his moments, but I think largely he did not ever really reach the potential that this offensive line, I think, can get to. So I think that's going to be a big part of this as well. In fact, coaching, I think, is going to be a very, shall I say, discussed factor throughout this season. I think you're going to see differences, and they won't all necessarily be better than what Tomlin's staff did, but I just think you're going to see different, and a lot of times different is taken positively. That doesn't mean there won't be hiccups, because there always are. But I feel pretty good about the direction of the coaching staff and the way things are going there. And I guess my last thought is the new thing the NFL came down with today. They're going to move to, I believe it's now 10 international games. You guys know me. I'm not a fan of international regular season games. Preseason, absolutely. You know what? If you want, take all the preseason games and send them over to Europe and South America. I'm fine with that. I am not a fan of regular season games being played outside of home stadiums. I think NFL regular season games are too damn meaningful to be played in other places. You heard guys like J.J. Watt, talking about the fact that these used to be kind of a neat little thing. Now they're becoming the norm. Players are not crazy about beating the shit out of each other for 60 minutes and then hopping on a plane to fly 10 hours, 12 hours. I mean, think about these two teams in Australia. So I'm not a fan, but they're going to make it even worse now, because what they're doing is they're essentially saying there's no more dedicated home team. So hear me out on this. They legitimately could take a Pittsburgh Baltimore divisional game and play it away from either Baltimore or Pittsburgh. Put yourself in another team's, Philly, Dallas, for example, Chiefs, Raiders, Denver Raiders, something like that. I mean, it's just I can't even imagine that particular situation, and they're already doing it this year. I mean, you've got what Niners and Rams playing overseas. I'm a big believer in you reward the people that helped you build what you have. And the fact of the matter is the NFL was built on the backs of the players, the coaches, but it was also built on the backs of fans that, have been dedicated for a long, long time. They're the ones that sit in the outdoors when it's 90 degrees or when it's 9 degrees. And I just don't like the idea of these regular season games going elsewhere. It has nothing to do with where they are or anything like that, because we have awesome fans in Latin America and in Europe. We do. Pittsburgh's got great fans around the world, and it has nothing to do with them. To me, it's about the teams, the expectations of what I grew up with, and yeah, I mean, I'm definitely sounding like get off my lawn guy, but I'm not gonna back off from that belief. And I would ask many of our European friends. I mean, the English Premier League. I mean, can you imagine Liverpool giving up a home game to come play in Chicago? I can't imagine, or even maybe a smaller market team, a smaller market team over there, where it's literally the community rallies around those teams, and they live and they die with it, much like we do with our teams. And I can't even imagine them doing it. And the fact that we're doing it just, grinds my gears. Let's just put it that way. Anyway, thanks for bearing with me for 10, 12 minutes here on the Inside Blitz. Make sure you join us coming up this Thursday night at 10 p.m. Eastern. We'll be live on YouTube, also over on X as well, on the @SC Blitz site or account, if you will, right there. And I expect another raucous show from myself and the guys. We always have a great time. We have an awesome group of people that join us every week, and it keeps growing even during the off season. So we'd love it if you stop by, join the chat, like, subscribe, do all those wonderful things that we really, really need you to do and want you to do on the podcast. Anyway, SteelDad signing off. And as always, go Steelers. We've had some drinks.